only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics, WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Today we've got the second part in a two-part series with Todd Starnes. He spoke at our ProFamily Legislators Conference just a few weeks ago. We couldn't get the entire presentation in yesterday, so today is the conclusion. Let's pick up right where we left off yesterday. Todd is the host of Fox News and commentary heard across the nation, and also a regular contributor to Fox and Friends and FoxNews.com. Let's pick up where we left off yesterday. Here's Todd Starnes at the ProFamily Legislators Conference.
The local franchise there in Ventura, California wanted to help out the local football team. So they gave the football team 200 Chick-fil-A meals, 200, gave free of charge. And they said, you can sell these at your fundraiser and you can use all the proceeds to help, get uniforms and football gear. And I mean, it was really quite a generous thing. And the principal said no, because someone might be offended. Now, my friends, who, pray tell, could be offended by a plump, juicy chicken breast tucked between two hot buttered buns? Who? This is the kind of nonsense that we're faced with on our school campuses. I had a story that came out last night, and I want to share it with you because I think it really talks a lot about the culture. And again, these are things that you are going to be facing as lawmakers and legislators, things that you can help fix. There's a charter school up in Michigan, South Arbor Charter School, and for decades they've had a wall of heroes. They had the astronauts from the Space Shuttle Columbia painted on the wall there, and they had folks like Mother Teresa and Betsy Ross and Albert Einstein, and to show that they were fairly diverse, they had Cesar Chavez up there. So it was a pretty diverse group of people, but they were heroes. The Hall of Heroes. Well, the new principal came in, and she got a group of teachers together, and they decided that it was time to come up with some new heroes. So they took the paintbrush, and they painted over the Space Shuttle astronauts, and they repainted a picture of President Obama. And they took Mother Teresa, and they painted over her, and they replaced her with Oprah. Yeah, Oprah. And they took away all of the old heroes, Betsy Ross, Einstein. And so the new heroes to these boys and girls that they are to emulate, President Obama, Oprah, J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, Walt Disney, and Stephen Jobs. A parent sent me confidentially the photographs and said this, Mr. Starnes, this is no longer a hall of heroes. This is a hall of celebrities. This is what they're teaching our kids. One of my heroes is Ronald Reagan. And a couple of months ago, I had the privilege of taking a tour of his ranch, the Reagan Ranch, up in just up near Santa Barbara. And I was really taken aback by the simplicity of this ranch. I was thinking grandiose things, but it was just a simple ranch. Just nothing out of the ordinary. They took me up to this spot way up on the mountains, and it's so remarkable. We don't have mountains like this back over in New York City. So we're up at this beautiful vista, this mountaintop, and on one side you can see the Pacific Ocean, and on the other side this vast farmland, and it reminded me, and I know this is it was kind of like a surreal moment, but it reminded me in that moment of the Hidden Valley Ranch salad dressing commercial. You guys know that beautiful scene? That's what it looked like. And they told me this is where Ronald Reagan would come to pray. This is where he would come to meditate and read his Bible. Ronald Reagan in the 1970s had a radio program, and he told a story one day about the Soviets when they invaded Ukraine. The Ukrainians were a devout Christian people, and they loved singing Christmas songs and Christmas caroling. One of their favorite national songs, oddly enough, was Silent Night. Ronald Reagan tells the story that the Soviets outlawed the singing of Christian songs when they invaded, but the Soviets kept singing them. They said roaming gangs of young Ukrainian teenagers would sing Christmas carols in defiance of the government, and they were beaten and they were thrown into jail, and they would not stop singing. So the Soviets came up with a plan. They would simply rewrite the lyrics to the songs. And so they took the song Silent Night, and they took all the references to Jesus and Mary, anything religious. They took those words out and they replaced them with secular terms.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. America has a history of great patriots who loved and sacrificed much for their country. One of these was John Witherspoon, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. While president at Princeton, he personally trained many who became important leaders in American government, including James Madison. How could John Witherspoon tell if someone really loved America? He explained, "He is the best friend to American liberty, who is most sincere and active in promoting true and undefiled religion, and who sets himself with the greatest firmness to bear down profanity and immorality of every kind. Whoever is an avowed enemy of God, I hesitate not to call him an enemy to his country." Founding Father John Witherspoon believed that a true American patriot opposed profanity and immorality and promoted true and undefiled religion.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
I remember that story because last Christmas I received a telephone call from a father in Long Island, New York. He said, "Mr. Starnes, we've just come back from our child's Christmas pageant at the local public school. It was a wonderful pageant. The children looked beautiful and their voices were angelic. But we were quite troubled when the children began to sing Silent Night, and all of the references to Jesus and all the references to religion had been removed and replaced with secular terms, just like the Soviets." You just think about that. That's happening here and now in our country. You think that's bad? I want to tell you about Walt Tutka. Walt Tutka is a friend of mine from South Jersey. Walt Tutka, a member of the Gideons. Many of you probably received a Gideon Bible when you were in grade school. I know I did when I grew up in North Mississippi. I got my little green Bible there. Today the Gideons are outlawed in many public schools. They're not allowed to set foot on public school property. But Walt was a substitute teacher, retired from his job, and a little child asked Walt for a copy of the Bible. And like a good Gideon, Walt said, "Sure." And Walt gave him a copy of the Bible. About 15 minutes later, Walt Tutka was summoned to the principal's office, and he was confronted and asked if, in fact, he had given a child a Bible. And Walt said, "Yes, I did." And they said, "Walt, you are charged with distributing religious material on public school property, and you are hereby suspended without pay." Walt was later fired from his job, and he is now suing the school district. But I think it's ironic because here in this country, the Gideons are not allowed on school property anymore. But do you know that in Russia right now, the Gideons are not only allowed on school property, they're allowed to give speeches about the Bible inside Russian classrooms. Topsy-turvy, folks. Topsy-turvy. But it's not just the military and it's not just the schools. We're also seeing it in the business community. Those who preach tolerance and diversity are in fact the least tolerant and diverse of all. I tell a story just a couple of weeks ago in my column about a Christian business in Lexington, Kentucky. Hands on Originals. The guy who owns this t-shirt company is a born-again believer. This guy wasn't out looking for a fight. He was just out to make t-shirts, living the American dream. But the fight came to him. A local gay rights organization asked him to make t-shirts for the gay pride event in their community. And he said no, he could not do that. But he said, "You know what? I know somebody who can." And let me give you their number, their information. We'll get these shirts made for you, but I can't do it because, of my religious beliefs. Well, this man was brought up on charges by the Human Rights Commission. Now, many communities across our country have human rights commissions. These are appointed positions. These are appointed commissions. No one's elected to this. And yet, these commissions hold vast powers. And they put this man on trial. And they found him guilty of discrimination. And now he's facing all of these fines. I want to read something that I had a chance to interview. And one of the things I love to do in my columns is I like to talk to the liberals, because I want you guys to understand. I want our readers to understand their psyche, where they're coming from. And listen to what the Human Rights Commission in Lexington, Kentucky told me. And I want to caveat this by saying something else. A lot of times people say, oh, well, Starnes just misquoted someone. Well, I want you to know something. Every single interview I do is recorded. So there's no way we get this stuff wrong. Listen to this. He's saying that people, Christian business owners, should leave their religion at home. Quote, it would be safe to do so, Executive Director Raymond Sexton told me. Or in this case, you can find yourself 2 years down the road and you're still involved in a legal battle because you did not do so. This is the United States of America, folks. This just happened about a month or so ago. Many of you may have heard about my friends Aaron and Melissa Klein. They run a bakery out on the West Coast, Sweet Cakes by Melissa. And again, small family bakery. They've got 3 young kids. They're making wedding cakes, folks. They're not trying to make public policy. A gay couple came in and said, we want you to make us a wedding cake. And they said, we can't do that because of our faith. They went and filed a complaint, registered a complaint. This business was boycotted and picketed. They actually went after all the other wedding vendors and said, if you do business with Sweet Cakes by Melissa, we will boycott and picket you. It got so bad they had to shut down their retail business, so now they have to make cakes out of their home. Business got so bad that now Aaron Klein has to take a job picking up garbage to pay the bills. All because they didn't make a wedding cake for a gay couple. Their children received death threats. This is America. I mean, we all know the stories about Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A. But what about those mom and pop businesses? What about the people who don't have the money for those high dollar attorneys? What about them? Who's going to look after them? That's where you guys come into the picture. In North Carolina, I saw a story I was reading on the airplane down here last night from North Carolina, where at least a half a dozen magistrates have had to quit their jobs. And the reason why is because they can't in good conscience marry gay couples. And do you know that under North Carolina law, should a gay couple come to them and they decline to marry that couple, they could be arrested and thrown into jail? That's the real deal, folks. And that's the real deal that a lot of our fellow countrymen are facing right now. I've got a line in my book. I don't care how you butter your biscuit, just don't tell me how to butter mine. I think a lot of people have forgot about that in this country. But it's not just the military, and it's not just the schools or the business community. We're also seeing it in our churches. Sadly, many of our churches have remained silent under these brutal attacks. In their quest to become culturally relevant, many of our congregations have become spiritually irrelevant. Folks, we're called to be salt and light. And unfortunately, many Christians these days are on a salt-free diet. I want to tell you about what happened in Houston, Texas. Many of you may have seen this. I broke the story about these 5 pastors who were subpoenaed. Their pastors, their sermons and their correspondence with their church members, it was all subpoenaed in relation to a non-discrimination ordinance. There's that word again. Well, we all know that as a result of the national pressure, those subpoenas were eventually removed. But I think the bigger story here is, how did it come about that Houston, Texas elected a liberal, left-wing, lesbian mayor? So I did a little bit of digging. And guess what I found out? This mayor got elected because only 13% of registered voters bothered to show up at the polls. So you want to know who's responsible for the pastors getting subpoenaed and almost getting thrown into jail? The church members sitting in the pews who didn't go and vote.
Hey, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And as you've had the opportunity to listen to WallBuilders Live, you've probably heard the wealth of information about our nation, about our spiritual heritage, about the religious liberties, about all the things that makes America exceptional. And you might be thinking, as incredible as this information is, I wish there was a way that I could get one of the WallBuilders guys to come to my area and share with my group, whether it be a church, whether it be a Christian school or public school or some political event or activity. If you're interested in having a WallBuilder speaker come to your area, you can get on our website at www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a tab for scheduling. And if you'll click on that tab, you'll notice there's a list of information from speakers' bios to events that are already going on, and there's a section where you can request an event to bring this information about who we are, where we came from, our religious liberties and freedoms. Go to the WallBuilders website and bring a speaker to your area.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
As we saw in the midterm elections, change happens when people vote. We saw Christians, cultural conservatives, going to the polls in droves and voting, and as a result, look what happened. I mean, when you look at the big map, look at the blues and reds when you look at the big picture. You know, the folks in Hollywood and the folks in New York and Chicago and San Francisco, they think that we're the anomalies. But we're not. They are. One of the stories that really just got me was the Internal Revenue Service. And, you know, the mainstream media, even a lot of the conservative media, they focused on the Tea Party groups, that the IRS was going after the Tea Party groups. But the IRS was also going after Christian groups, too. They were demanding from pro-life groups to know the contents of their prayers. They even audited Billy Graham, America's pastor. I mean, if they're going to audit Billy Graham, you know, all of us are in hot water. Billy Graham. They told a church in Wyoming that they had to turn over the contents, or they had to turn over their membership rolls. Then there was a story I did a couple of weeks ago out of Idaho. Husband and wife in their 60s, ordained ministers of the Foursquare Gospel denomination. They own the Hitching Post Wedding Chapel. And they perform Christian weddings there. They were told when gay marriage became legalized in that state just a few weeks ago that they had to perform same-sex wedding ceremonies. Had to do it. Telling these preachers what they had to do. And they said, well, what happens if we don't? They said, well, you go to jail for 180 days. And you face a $1,000 fine for every time you refuse. That couple is now suing the city of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. But did you ever think that we would be in a country where the government would tell pastors what to do and what to say in their pulpits? Did you ever think that we would live in a country where freedom of religion would come under such assault? So what are we going to do about it? Ronald Reagan said we're just one generation away from losing our freedom. I grew up in the Breakfast Club generation, the decade of parachute pants and other questionable fashion choices. But you know what? My generation, we dropped the ball. We just dropped the ball. But something is happening in this new generation. We're seeing young Christian Americans, young patriots that are rising up, and they're saying, we're not going to be quiet. We're going to stand for religious liberty. And I do believe that God is possibly raising up the next Billy Graham or Billy Sunday out of this generation. Young men and women who are unashamed of the gospel message. Now, I want to tell you about Roy Costner, one of my great heroes of the faith. Roy Costner is 18 years old from a place called Liberty, South Carolina. Roy is a little Baptist kid just like myself, and he's smart as a whip, and he was the valedictorian of his high school graduating class. So he got called to the principal's office and said, Roy, since you're the valedictorian, you get to deliver the speech. But when you write the speech, you have to turn it in to us so that we can take a look at it. Well, Roy did as he was told, and he wrote his speech and he turned it in to the principal. And 5 government employees read and censored Roy's speech. 5. Roy told me when he got the document back, he sent me a copy of it, and it looked like something the NSA had redacted. There are these black blotches all over the place. I'm like, Roy, what were you cussing, Roy? I didn't know. And he said, no, sir. He says, that word right there, that's God and that's Jesus. And I was quoting from the New Testament here, and they had taken every single religious reference out of Roy's speech. And Roy was perplexed because he told me that was the speech that God wanted him to give. So this little 18-year-old boy went to go talk to his daddy, who was the youth pastor of the church. And like a good youth pastor, he said, son, you got to go talk to the senior pastor about this. And so smart youth pastor. And you know, they sat and prayed about it, and the pastor gave this young man some words of wisdom. And he said, Roy, you do have a decision to make. You can take a stand, or you can do what the government is telling you to do. But whatever you do, don't do it for yourself. Do it for God. So graduation day came, and there was a huge crowd in Liberty, South Carolina. Everybody was there. Roy's mama and daddy were over here, the graduating class over here. All those teachers were sitting on the stage like this, and they were not your run-of-the-mill dumb educators. They were not going to be fooled. So they put Roy's government-approved speech on the platform, and they refused to allow him to carry anything up on the stage. They didn't want Roy to pull a fast one. But if I can get spiritual for just a moment, these folks weren't counting on the power of the Holy Spirit. Because old Roy Costner got up on that stage and he looked out over the big audience there in Liberty, South Carolina. And he took that government-approved speech in his hands and he tore it in half. And he asked the entire audience to stand to their feet. He asked them to bow their heads, and he recited, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Roy Costner, 18 years old from Liberty, South Carolina, took a stand. And so, my fellow Americans, I want to say my fellow legislators, but I'm not elected. So I want to ask you this morning in this place, who among you is willing to take a stand with the Roy Costners of America? Who among you is willing to say, we will not be silenced? They may try to shut down our bakeries. They may try to shut down our prayer groups. They may demand to know the contents of our prayers, but we will not be silenced. This is why I wrote, God Bless America. This is the evidence that demands a verdict. Something is happening in our country, and we've got to change it. And we have the power to do that. I told you about what happened in Houston. And this is something I wrote in one of my commentaries. Bad things happen when good people don't vote. Now I know that things may appear to be hopeless. But legislators, I'm here to tell you that hope is not lost. Because we know that true hope and change cannot be found at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And we know that true hope and change cannot be found in Congress. True hope and change can only be found in a life changed by the redeeming blood of Christ. That's what I believe. One of my favorite singers is a guy named Steve Green. He's a Christian singer, a Christian artist. And years ago, he wrote this song. And I think that there's a nugget of truth in here for all of us. Oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful. May the fire of our devotion light their ways. May the footprints that we leave lead them to believe, and the lives we live inspire them to obey. Oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful. Friends, our job in all of this is to stand alongside these young patriots, to be there with them when the going gets tough. And though the flame is flickering and the footsteps are few, the good news is there's still a spark and there are still footsteps. But we have to be willing to step out of our comfort zones. We have to be willing to march in the streets. We have to be willing to sit in county lockup. That's the price that we may be facing. Remember what Rick Warren said. This is the civil rights issue of our generation. Those aren't just words, my friends. This is where we're heading. Our fellow countrymen are being threatened with lawsuits. They're being told that the Christian voice is no longer welcome in the public marketplace of ideas. This isn't America. This is not America. So in closing, I want to quote these words from a great hymn writer. Rise up, O men of God. Rise up, O women of God. And let the cry go out from the hill country of Texas to the concrete canyons of New York City that these United States are still, and may they always be, one nation under God. Thank you very much.
That was Todd Starnes at the ProFamily Legislators Conference a few weeks back. Special thanks to him for coming out and speaking, and also for coming on our program now and again. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.